Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Curut Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1995 superhero action film Batman Forever. Now, Batman Forever is the third installment of a four-part series. Tim Burton steps down and Joel Schumacher takes over the helm as the director. It is produced by Tim Burton and Peter McGregor Scott. The script was done by Lee Batchelor, Janet Scott Batchelor, and Akiva Goldsman. The score was done by Elliot Goldenthal, who replaces Danny Elfman. The cinematography by Stephen Goldblatt, and it was edited by Dennis Verkler and Mark Stevens. And it stars Val Kilmer, Tommy Lee Jones, Jim Carrey, Nicole Kidman, Chris O'Donnell, Michael Gough, Pat Hingle, Drew Barrymore, Debi Mazar, and a cameo appearance from Ed Begley Jr. So, under the questionable direction of one Joel Schumacher, Batman Forever takes all of the doom and gloom from the previous Tim Burton installments, which was actually a good thing, by the way, and it was completely ruined by a more flashy, colored-over, watered-down kiddie film, and that's where the franchise starts to go down the tube. Yes, I know it didn't go as low as the cheesy old 1960s Adam West Batman, but it seems to come very close. And this is not to be a hypocrite, but, you know, when I was a kid I actually enjoyed that series, even if it was just before my time. I guess trying to draw towards the younger age demographics, Mr. Schumacher alleviates all the dark, rainy gloom that Burton created and made an atmosphere with vibrant colors, booming explosions, and scenarios that might keep your attention intact. But the scenarios just seem to be padded on without any reason or rhyme. And I kept saying to myself during the whole process as to why did one particular scene take place, let alone what was the purpose of that certain set piece that made the execution virtually null and void. I mean, the plot was already paper thin, but at least have the set pieces serve some sort of purpose. I mean, is that so hard to ask? And the ultimate poison that Schumacher injected in the franchise was his negligence to implement the psychological aspects that Mr. Burton carried in his previous two installments. Even so, from the recurring nightmare involving what else? A large bat, big surprise. This movie is not only narrow, but I also found it to be very lame. The film seems to segue into another side story as our caped crusader, this time Val Kilmer replacing Michael Keaton, is in the battle with the notorious coin-flipping, deranged psycho killer Harvey Two-Face Dent, played by Tommy Lee Jones. The city of Gotham has gone through what appears to be a beauty makeover. Gone are the dark and dreary colors brought on by Burton's production designers Anton Faust and Bo Welsh. Schumacher's imagery is dolled up with CGI-enhanced vibrancy by day and repetitive neon green signs at night. The opening scenes, actually, believe it or not, were quite exciting, but then waters down to the formulaic melodrama as Bruce Wayne, encountering a psychopathic genius who could very well just be Ace Ventura gone bad, Dr. Edward Nygma, played by the always fun Jim Carrey, who has worked on a diabolical apparatus that reads minds, long before he developed his moniker, better known as the Riddler. Nigma joins forces with Two-Face to exploit the entire city of Gotham. Just who is this Batman, who seems more overwhelmed playing sort of like a father figure to an orphaned acrobat named Dick Grayson, who later adopted the name Robin, played by the ever-annoying Chris O'Donnell, and a new love interest in Dr. Chase Meridian, played by Nicole Kidman, who I guess was kind of synonymous to the Bond characters, you know, like in the first Batman, I guess the Bat Diva was Vicky Vale, played by Kim Basinger. In Batman Returns, it was Selina Kyle, better known as the Catwoman, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. And I guess the new flavor of the film is Dr. Chase Meridian. So after a myriad of unriveting confrontations with his adversaries, Schumacher decides the time is right for at least one last explosive showdown just before the end credits start to materialize. Oh, the ranting doesn't stop here. If you thought the effects, the atmosphere, and the production designs were insignificant to the two installments, well, I'm pretty sure the acting could make up for it, right? Not! The acting also contributes to the side effects of Mr. Schumacher's debauchery to this up until now sprawling franchise. Kilmer is virtually a cardboard cutout here, and the feeling of Michael Keaton's interpretation of the reclusive eccentric millionaire has found a restless foot in the grave. It seems that Kilmer didn't seem to need to be too interested in the role, and you could see it from his stoic expressions that he simply just wanted out, but just couldn't back down. Chris O'Donnell, like I mentioned, is just as annoying as he ever can as Robin, and Nicole Kidman as Dr. Chase Meridian was nothing more than just window dressing and playing the all-so-familiar damsel in distress, who seems to have somewhat of a sexual attraction towards bad boys. Tommy Lee Jones looks completely embarrassing and unconvincing as the evil Two-Face, and this is one role that Jones will likely be forgotten for playing. He is truly usurped by the more bizarrely flamboyant but entertainingly funny Riddler, in which Jim Carrey practically steals every scene he's in, even though he's just reliving Ace Ventura gone evil. Michael Gough definitely returns back for the third time in his subtle but somewhat convincing role as the Wayne family's ever-so-loyal butler, Alfred, but he just seems like he can't implement very much chemistry to the wooden Val Kilmer. There are actually some tidbits about Batman that doesn't make this movie entirely contrived. It does gracefully follow the traditional storylines of some of the characters, namely the story of how Dick Grayson entered Wayne's life and how he became Robin, and how hotshot lawyer Harvey Dent became the coin-flipping Two-Face when, hot oil burned half of his face. That to me was, mildly satisfying, even though it was very brief. The other good thing was U2's soundtrack. That was totally awesome. I didn't care too much for the cheesy Seal song Kiss from a Rose, partially because I'm not really too much of a pop music enthusiast, but I guess it did come in at the right time. And then the score was also upsetting too, as Danny Elfman's engaging score was sadly replaced by Elliot Goldenthal's more spontaneous, campy, heroic interludes. The Batmobile looked like a cheesy prototype in contrast to the once beastly vehicle that Keaton rode in the previous two films before. The costuming was also quite lame. I actually was annoyed by Batman's costume, which also seemed to be complete with nipples. The Riddler's costume, I practically think Jim Carrey would have been better as the Joker from the first one, instead of Jack Nicholson. I don't know, is it just me? Anyhow, the Riddler's costumes were lame and campy, and to have Robin's costumes similar to Batman's was also purely mistreated there as well. So it's kind of sad that we just don't know when to keep a good thing coming, as we see Batman Forever failing to measure up to the other two installments. Sometimes, change isn't always for the better. And this rule applies to Batman Forever. Mr. Schumacher, I think you owe the DC comic world an apology. You owe this franchise an apology. You owe the audience an apology. And you may also owe Bob Kane, the creator of Batman, an apology for making a debauchery out of this film. If I was to give this film a scale out of 10, I would have to give it a 5. And maybe that is being too generous on my part. But then again, that's better than what I gave Batman and Robin. That one was worse. Like I said, I gave the original Batman an 8 out of 10. Batman Returns got a 9 out of 10. This one gets a 5. Batman and Robin gets a 3. But I'm glad that, Christopher Nolan eventually came back 8 years later and recreated a whole new Batman makeover. So I give praise to him. Joel Schumacher, as much as I respect you in movies like Falling Down, amongst many others, you just weren't cut out to do a Batman franchise. Maybe you grew up with the 1960s Adam West, Burt Ward version of Batman, which is fine, but by just giving all of Tim Burton's 2 installments a complete makeover does not do this film justice. And it's just sad for me that I have to be the one to arbitrarily say that this movie just was not a great adaptation, let alone a great film. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening, and if you have any comments, please feel free to write in. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I will be back again with another movie review. So until then, this is Eric Currott Writer, signing off. Goodbye. Keep watching those movies.